Today I'm going to show you 3 ways to preserve your tomatoes. I have about 20 pounds of tomatoes here to get through, so let's get started. Having your own preserved tomatoes is great to have on hand whenever you want to make your favorite spaghetti sauce, chili, pizza sauce, anywhere really where you're using your tomatoes. It's great to have your own garden fresh tomatoes, or even if they're store-bought or bought at a farmer's market and you came across a good sale, those are great to use as well. If you're interested in seeing any of my favorite equipment, be sure to check out the links in the description below to my favorite products. Now the first thing that needs to happen before we even get started is that we need to wash these tomatoes. So let's get these over to the sink and get them washed. So you want to wash your tomatoes to make sure that you're removing any of the dirt from the garden or anything left over from the garden. You want a nice clean product to put in your cans. Once your tomatoes are properly washed, you're going to make an X at the bottom of your tomato with a very sharp knife. Making this X helps remove the skin once we've got them boiled. Now that all the tomatoes have been properly washed, we need to put them in boiling water. You only want to leave them in the boiling water long enough to remove the skins, and this is what helps remove the skins. So you're going to immerse them in the boiling water and keep an eye on them. Once you see that the skin is starting to crack or curl, then you take them out and immediately immerse them in some cold water to stop them from cooking, because you don't want your tomatoes to cook. Do this in small batches, removing the skins as you go, but remember, don't throw away those skins, because we do have something that we're going to be doing with those a little later on, so just put them aside. Once all the skins have been removed from the tomatoes, all that's left to do is to stuff them inside of your jars. So in each quart-sized jar, you're going to be adding 1 teaspoon of pickling salt, 2 tablespoons of bottled lemon juice. Remember, we always have to use bottled lemon juice in canning to ensure that we have the correct acidity. And as well, always use pickling salt. In household salt, they put an anti-caking agent in there and it can clump up inside of your jar. So always use your pickling salt. You want to make sure that your tomatoes are going to be cut in large pieces, and remove the end, especially if in a little bit of the inside of the tomato, especially if it's hard. I'm using Roma tomatoes, but you can use any kind of tomatoes to put in jars. The process is the same. You want to make sure to pack them nice and tight inside your jars. Don't remove any of the liquid as well. This is part of ensuring the acidity of your product. We need all that liquid. Once you've got all your tomatoes inside of your jars, all that you have left to do is to backfill it with hot water. Remember, we want to keep everything hot, so the jars are nice and hot. Just pull them from the dishwasher. And my canners are in the back, heating up. You can probably start hearing it already. So you're going to see that tomatoes, there's not a whole lot of room to put some water in it, but you still need to backfill them with water and remove the bubbles, leaving 1 inch of headspace on the top of your jars. I'm going to put a little bit on top and then kind of work the water in. I'm doing a raw pack, so I haven't preheated my tomatoes. You can do a hot pack. It just involves cooking your tomatoes a little bit. When you do that, there's less separation. I don't know if you've ever canned tomatoes and you see that there's a little bit of the tomatoes seem to float and there's more liquid at the bottom. There's no problem with that. Your tomatoes are fine. Some people just don't like the way it looks. I never like to add on extra steps, so I find doing a hot pack is an added step that you need to do. So then once you've added your water, you want to make sure that you remove all the air bubbles from inside of your jars. And then you readjust your liquids once you've got all the bubbles out. If you're really interested in seeing more information about the steam canner, I have a couple of videos as well. There's one on how to use the steam canner from A to Z, and it's my relish recipe. If you're looking for that video, I will link them all in the description below. So be sure to check those out. As usual, we clean the rims of our jars. We just need water for this, since there's no meat involved. It's very important to add your acids to your tomatoes, your lemon juice, and your salt. We think tomato is a high acid food, but when it comes to canning, it is acid, but we need to add the lemon juice to make sure that we have the proper acidity for the safety of the product. So never skimp on the lemon juice when you're canning your tomatoes. It's a really important step. Once you have all your rims nice and clean, we're going to add on our caps. And then you put on your rings fingertip tight. You don't want to put them on too tight. Just enough until you feel a little bit of a resistance. Once this is done, you're going to transfer them over to your canners. I'm going to put the majority in my pressure canner. I will be putting a couple in my steam canner just to show you how that goes. So let's do that. Now that all the jars are in the canners and we're waiting for everything to heat up, I just want to talk to you for a minute about the two methods that I'm using. So the first method that I'm using to preserve my tomatoes is the steam canner. Now the steam canner is basically the same concept as water bath canning, except a lot easier, a lot more convenient, and a lot faster. I absolutely love steam canning. There's a couple things you need to remember about steam canning, however. You can only steam can for a maximum of 45 minutes. So anything that you would usually put in your water bath canner is fine to use in your steam canner as long as the processing time is no more than 45 minutes, what I should say. Now for the tomatoes that we're putting in the steam canner, they need to be backfilled with hot water. If you're just doing like a raw packed tomato directly in your jar with no water, you cannot steam can them. The other method that I'm using for preserving my tomatoes is my pressure canner. In the pressure canner, your tomatoes only need to be processed for 10 minutes. It's really quick. But if you compare the two, even if one is 45 minutes and one is 10 minutes, it'll probably take close to the same amount of time anyway, since you have to heat up your pressure canner, bring it to pressure, and let it depressurize before you open. So I think all in all, it won't be much faster. But there's one thing to remember. The longer you process something, the more nutrients that are lost. So this will be processing for 45 minutes, this will be processing for 10. But they're both fine, they're both acceptable, and they're both really convenient. So enough on that. Another thing that's really convenient with both these methods is the minimum amount of water that you need for each one. So when you prepare your steam canner, you fill it up to the bottom rack. And when you're using your pressure canner, you fill it up to the first line inside of your pressure canner. So it's really energy efficient. Not a lot of water is used with either one of these two methods. Now that we've got everything moved over to our canners, all we have left to do is to put the covers on and process these jars. We're going to turn up the heat. And basically that's it. So we wait till this starts to boil. Steam canners have a section on the top. It's like a dial gauge, and you have to see where you are with your altitude. Once it gets into the color of your altitude, let's say, that's when you start timing the process. So the pressure canner, we have to bring it up to heat, vent it, bring it up to pressure, process it for the amount of time that requires, depressurize. Just to give you an idea of how fast the steam canner is, it has been literally 5 minutes since I have put the cover on and I turned up the heat. Now mind you, the water was already a little warm in advance, and the dial is already in the green section as to where it needs to be, so I can start timing. So I am going to time the tomatoes here in my steam canner for 45 minutes. One important thing to remember, once you get into that green section, for me it's the green section anyway, you do want to lower your heat down a little bit, because if this boils too hard, you're going to lose a lot of water and you're going to risk this drying out, since it has to process for 45 minutes. So just make sure to lower down the heat just enough so it keeps it in the safe zone, but it's not boiling too hard and it doesn't risk boiling dry. So there you have it. So there's 27 minutes left on the steam canner, and this button just popped up, and so that means it's time to vent the pot. So now we have to time this for 10 minutes. We haven't started the processing time yet. So now we're venting our pot for 10 minutes. All right, our pot has vented for 10 minutes. There's 17 minutes left on the steam canner, and we're starting to build the pressure in the pressure canner. I think they will catch up, but in the end, this one will have to depressurize where this one won't. So I think this one will still be the winner, but this one's still pretty quick. So our pressure canner is at 11 pounds of pressure. There's 11 minutes left on the steam canner, and we gotta time this for 10 minutes. So this will actually be done 1 minute before the steam canner. So let's time this for 10 minutes. The tomatoes are done. The tomatoes are done with 38 seconds on the clock for the steam canner. So it's a pretty close race. I'm going to turn this off. So when the steam canner is finished, you got to turn off the heat, but you got to let your jars sit in there for another 5 minutes. Your pressure canner, this is where it takes more time. We have to let it depressurize, and that can take anywhere between 20 to 25 minutes. It depends how full your pressure canner is. It's a pretty close race. And there it goes. So we'll turn the heat off. Time that for 5 minutes. And then it'll be done. So the 5 minutes are up. We can remove our jars from the steam canner. This is where you would save time if you had a second batch. So this one is nowhere near being ready to remove the jars from the canner, the pressure canner. But these, I just need to remove them, and I could start another batch right away. So it would be a lot faster with a steam canner, allowing you to start multiple batches. So now we just let those set, and we have to wait for this to depressurize. Time to empty the pressure canner. Now remember, I told you that I was going to show you 3 ways of preserving your tomatoes. So the third way that I want to talk to you about today is the tomato skins. So what are we going to do with tomato skins? The third method of preserving tomatoes that I want to show you is dehydration. I have taken all of my tomato skins and I've laid them all out inside of my dehydrator. 20 pounds of tomatoes actually gave me 6 full trays of my dehydrator. So I'm really happy. And I have some left over. So I'll be definitely doing another batch as well. These tomato skins are great to have on hand. You can throw them inside of soups and you can grind them up to powder them. They're really good. It works really well as a tomato paste. If you're interested in seeing more information about dehydrating these tomato skins, I do have a video as well that goes from start to finish on how to do this process. Be sure to check out that link, but basically I showed you all there is to it already, but you can check out that link if you want a little bit more detailed information. So back to our tomatoes. So there you go. 3 ways to preserve your tomatoes. You to decide which one you prefer, the pressure canner, the steam canner. Honestly, when I have more than what can fit in either in one or the other, I use both. And they both work really well, and they are both fairly quick and pretty much close to the same time. So once you've let your jars settle, remember you can't move them for 24 hours, so just leave them there. Be sure to remove your rings, never stir your jars with your ring on top, and be sure to write down the year because sometimes we forget how long it has been since we've got these products canned. They will last up to a year in a cool, dark, dry environment, so I'm sure you'll use them up within that year. I do hope you've enjoyed my video. I hope you enjoy my content. If you do, give it a big thumbs up, and be sure to check back again soon to see what other content I have coming up.